Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we're actually talking about the Colonial pipeline situation, which just really took this very interesting twist, although I don't know if the word interesting is right. Now, we all know, obviously, that they went, they went under a cyber attack, gas was shut down, everybody panicked and rushed out to various gas stations, overwhelming the gas stations, raising prices, causing shortages, all of that, simply because the pipeline was under a cyber attack and got hit. But here's the thing. Colonial Pipeline, their actual pipeline, wasn't actually hit by a cyber attack. Really, here's what's going on. And as I said, this is interesting. It's also infuriating, and it's somewhere else in between. And this is coming from reporting from Jalopnik. Now, if you don't know who they are, they're actually an automotive news site, which kind of makes sense that they'd be reporting on this, given that gas for millions of cars and airplanes as well was affected. And here we go. A cyber attack that shut down the Colonial pipeline, causing this panic and obviously fears of shortages and everything else, didn't actually shut the pipeline down. What it did was impact the billing system at Colonial Pipeline, and then they in turn shut down the billing systems, they shut down the entire pipeline because they were worried about how they would collect payments from their customers. Yes, the fuel-carrying pipeline was shut down last week in order to prevent a company that is entrusted with what should have been essentially a public utility from essentially enduring an accounting headache. That's it. They didn't want to have to basically jump through the hoops to figure all of this out through their billing, so they just shut the whole damn thing down. Now, according to reporting by 0 Days Kim Zetter, she noted that basically this may be the case, and CNN actually confirmed this in a later report, and I quote, "The company halted operations because its billing system was compromised. 3 people briefed on the matter told CNN, and they were concerned they wouldn't be able to figure out how much to bill customers for the fuel they received. One person familiar with the response said the billing system is central to the unfettered operation of the pipeline. That is part of the reason getting it back up and running has taken time." Now, asked about whether the shutdown was prompted by concerns about payment, the company spokesperson said, and I quote, "In response to the cybersecurity attack on our system, we proactively took certain systems offline to contain the threat, which temporarily halted all pipeline operations and affected some of our IT systems." That's fairly coy. Now, according again to CNN, at this time, and I quote, "There is no evidence that the company's operational technology systems, meaning those that would be running the pipeline, were compromised by the attackers." Zetter also pointed out that the affected system handled the billing in a prior report to CNN, wherein she cited Colonial itself. The company said that the hack affected its corporate network and not the operations of the pipeline. In a statement published this past Saturday, it said the ransomware affected only its corporate IT network, although the operational network that controls its pipelines and distributes fuel is separate from the corporate network and wasn't infected, according to Colonial. So they temporarily shut down the pipeline as a precaution to prevent the infection from spreading. This essentially what they're saying here is the pipeline was fine, and the gasoline was just sitting there because essentially they shut the pipeline down, even though it was a separate operational technology infrastructure. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And meanwhile, Colonial obviously had to get its corporate network running in order to process one amount of fuel went to each one of its clients. And so Zetter noted, and I quote, "Colonial's operational network uses automation systems to control and monitor the flow of fuel from refineries and tank farms into Colonial's pipeline and from Colonial's pipeline into the tanks and transportation facilities belonging to suppliers and distributors." As if that weren't enough, CNN also disclosed that the attackers that breached the automated billing system were likely quote-unquote novices who actually miscalculated their own actions. Among the signs that the hackers were indeed novices is the fact that they chose a high-risk target that deals in a low-margin business, meaning the attack was unlikely to yield the kind of payout experienced ransomware actors are typically looking for, meaning those high profitability that are not running essentially on margin like that. And I quote, This was a gross miscalculation on the hacker's part, and that's a source talking to CNN. So obviously, this is one of the big things that we are talking about here. Is essentially this was a nationwide panic, especially on the eastern seaboard. And that is insane. So Zetter even quoted the attackers who supplied a press release in this, and in this release, the quote-unquote novice hackers reminded Colonial that basically doing its business was not doing business with them was basically in their best interest. They went on to refer Colonial to its support team, who was available via chat and could answer any questions Colonial had. And they wrote, and I quote, "We do not want to kill your business. Before an attack, we carefully analyze your accountancy and determine how much you can pay based on your net income. You can ask all your questions in the chat before paying, and our support will answer them." So this is absolutely insane. If we are looking at this now, most organizations that have both IT or information technology infrastructure and OT or operation technology infrastructure, manufacturers, pipelines, these kinds of things, usually have them segregated, meaning an impact on any one of those network infrastructures tends not to bleed out between them. Oftentimes what we see is a separate management network that is significantly hardened and isolated that potentially has hooks into one or the other or both. And so affecting the billing system essentially meant that they were going to just shut the pipeline down because they couldn't figure out who to bill. I don't think it had anything really to do with protecting the actual operational technology network. But again, I don't know Colonial Pipeline's infrastructure. I don't know their topology personally, but I would speculate that is probably the case here. But the issue that I have here is that the decision that they made was they had basically two choices in here. Their billing network was shut down. And the consequences of that are, one, we basically help ourselves and we keep the pipe shut down, not flowing gas until we straighten out our billing. That's the easier thing to us. The possible repercussions of that, obviously, are runs on gas, panics, concern over national infrastructure, critical infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. Or they can take their massive insurance policy for things like this and have it pay out, as they are essentially still letting the gas flow through this entire thing and then figuring out retroactively how to bill. It is messier for them, but it doesn't cause a national panic. And that is actually the crux of what we are talking about here today, is how, if you are basically running critical infrastructure, do you, one, make sure it keeps online to ensure the survivability and viability of a country or a large part of a country, and two, what are the basic operational procedures if part of that network comes under attack, but you can still keep running safely, meaning you're not worried about that network getting infected. I think that is something that needs to be understood. It needs to be talked about, because if I was a CEO, for example, of Colonial Pipeline, I'd say, you know what, we have insurance. It's going to be messy for the billing department for a month or two, but we are going to figure that out. We are going to keep the gas flowing, because the last thing we need are fist fights and armed people at gas stations, which is what we literally saw. People filling up absolutely everything with gas, freaking out like everybody freaked out over toilet paper in the pandemic. That is obviously a huge, huge problem. And that is a poor decision, I think, on Colonial Pipeline, given that they do have insurance, given that they can clean that up. I think what we are talking about here is helping the public trust, helping the public more than anything else, instead of helping ourselves. And sometimes that means a pain point. Sometimes you roll the hard 6, but you do it. You do it because you don't want your fellow citizens shooting each other at gas pumps. And that is crazy. And that is what happened with Colonial. I think we'll see more. I still don't understand how they got in. I don't know if it was user error or it was a flaw in a firewall or something else that happened. We don't actually know, nor can I state or speculate on that. Same with their connection between their IT network and their OT network. At best I can speculate for there, but usually these things are segregated. So we will see what happens here. This is a huge, huge thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if the federal government that now has wind of this decides to come down and say, if you're running some kind of critical infrastructure and it's not affected directly, meaning you've got something that's, let's say, tangential to that, but not directly connected to it, then you keep running and we will pick up the pieces later. Shoot now, ask questions later, I think is essentially where this is going to come down to. So we'll see what happens with this, but the pipeline itself was not actually hit by a cyber attack, and that, I think, is news to a ton of people. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.